Thank you all for coming in and being willing to sit indoors for what will be a most stimulating presentation, but to sit indoors on the first what seems like really spring day of the year and a Friday afternoon. So it's definitely a tribute to your drawing power, Clement, that anybody's here. We're delighted to have Clement Dai with us here this afternoon. We will have a conversation. Clement will say a few words, and then we'll open it up for questions. And one of the young stars of the McCarthy Center, Catherine Hockman here, will also be asking questions. And I, who, if you don't happen to know, I'm John Hasselberg. I'm a professor in the Global Business Leadership Department, which is quite happily housed right next door to the McCarthy Center, in fact. Clement is right now a second-year MBA student at the Harvard Business School. He grows a combined passion on U.S.-China relations, both in the private sector with IBM Global Energy and Utilities. He's worked with the United Nations Development Program, Quadrian LLC, and the Wilson Center and the Kissinger Institute, and so on. So he has a very fine combination of public-private engagement. He grew up in Shanghai and in Zhejiang, and has received a college education in Hong Kong and, of course, here at St. Ben St. John's. He currently serves as co-president of the Greater China Club of Harvard Business School. He was a Brandel Scholar when he was here at St. Ben St. John's and a student senator. He and a member of Phi Beta Kappa. So, with that, I'll sit down and join them. And Clement, you can say a few things.
Should I stand?
Go ahead. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Thanks, John, and thanks everybody for coming today. And a lot of familiar faces, professors and monks. And it's truly my honor to come back. I was chatting and joking with several of you. Today is actually my last class at Harvard, but I chose to skip my class at Harvard, come to here to speak to you. And you know how important this community is to me personally and professionally. So today, I just want to share some of my lessons learned in the past 10 years. Really, it's been 10 years. When I just arrived here, I was 19, and now I'm almost 30. So need to make some money for the rest of the time very soon. So I will go very brief, try to be very brief, talk about three things. The first thing is looking for myself. The second thing is some regrets I had when I was a student here. The last thing was community and professional life later on I had. So for the first thing, looking for myself, when I just arrived here, 2008, and the 19 years I had in China was educated heavily, academic-wise, in mathematics, in natural science, all these emphasis academically. But on the social and the view of the world side, I was pretty much a group thinker, or you call it collectivist. Well, when I came here, I realized there's a different way to think about the world, to look at the world, which you call individualistic. And at first, I thought, whoa, how selfish people can be in this country. But later on, I realized this is the beginning of self-exploration. And I pay that a tribute to a couple of my professors and mentors here I've got to know. And sophomore year, I had this class called Philosophy of Human Nature by Father Rene. And the purpose of taking that class was I was so confused in my life, who I was and what I want to do with my life. And so on the syllabus of that class, it says, if you take this class, the fundamental questions we will dive in in this particular class is to solve the issue of self-identity, to understand your purpose, to understand where are you going. Therefore, I sign up. I guess education is all nice, but education is not magical to solve some life issues. Otherwise, any couple getting into fight will go to college, just take another class to solve their marital crisis, right? So by the end of the semester, I surprisingly had a good grades, and I went to Father Rene. I said, why I still don't know, why I still don't have my answer. And he looked at me and he said, how old do you think I am? I said, maybe 60s, 70s, I don't know. And he's like, yeah, close. Even in my 70s, I still don't have my answers. Suddenly I realized this is a journey. That was sophomore year when I was sitting in that classroom. That was just the beginning of self-exploration, understanding myself. And even to this day, I still sometimes from time to time question about my purpose and question about the type of decisions I make in my life and in personal life and in professional life. And later on in junior year, I did two things. One is I took a piano class. My piano professor is here today, Wayne Ebers. He retired. And the second thing, I joined men's spirituality group. Father Doug is here today too. On a piano class, I asked the Ebers, I said, how comes you such a professional master? Do you think teach me such a rookie? And he said, it's the fundamental of the techniques in music, which makes a musician different from the rest of musicians. That's the first thing I remember. The second thing I remember was one day I walked into his studio, and that was my sophomore year. Again, remember the confusing Clement Dai in the background. So one day I was very, very upset about the fact that I still don't have my answer from my philosophy class and some other issues because I was breaking up with my ex-girlfriend in here. But as soon as I sit down in front of the piano, I put my fingers on the keyboard and I started playing 40 seconds or 50 seconds, maybe 53 seconds, if I counted correctly. Ebers asked me to stop. I said, why? And he said, you are not here. And I was shocked, because I didn't say anything. I just played the keyboards. But he noticed I was not there. And he dismissed me. And I got out of the room after 10 minutes, after he's tortured me why I didn't practice enough, all that. But that was a very interesting moment for me to realize when you are not concentrated enough on whatever you are doing, people notice. You don't even need to verbally to communicate with this individual. People notice your presence is absent in that moment. So that's a non-academic way for me to, outside of philosophy class, in music class, I suffer too. A second part in sophomore year, junior year was I was an atheist. Before coming to St. John's, I become a spiritual person. After I came here, spending 1 or 2 years, I don't know whether there are any atheist professors here, but that's why I look at business professors. Maybe they are. capitalist, right? How you can reconcile these 2 points?
Agnostic, probably. Right?
Yeah. Okay. So, as a spiritual / atheist student and Chinese student, I signed up for this mysteriously confusing name of programming called Men's Spirituality Group. Firstly, it's men only. Second of all, spirituality group. What does that mean? And but after fast forward to 2 years, I ironically became the student leader of that group. How did that happen? But in these 2 years, basically the program itself created a very safe space for myself to express my vulnerability, my confusion in life, and some of the difficulties mentally, psychologically I've been through when I was here as a 20-year-old. So after that, I kept in contact with Father Doc, and he even helped me to modify my Harvard application essay. So thank you, Father Doc. That's the biggest thing you did in my life. So really, to summarize on the personal searching part is to look inwardly. If you asked what my current education in Boston offered me, is to look outside, what's possible, and where is the limit? The sky is the limit. Well, even before jumping on the external, looking externally, the ability to look internally, that ability I developed here. Second point was on the regret. My almost last month of my senior year, like sometime around this time, 6, 7 years ago, I went to an interview through a introduction by a alum, Terry Fruth. Terry later became also a very good mentor, career mentor of mine, and prevented me from getting into a lot of legal troubles. He's a very good lawyer. And so Terry said, why not you go interview at this company? And it later became my first job in private sector. But one weird question I got in the interview was, I was sitting across the CEO of the company, who happened to be also sitting on the board of director at St. John's now, Jim Landy. And Jim and Aaron, my hiring manager, asked me why you only had 3.95 GPA. Where is that 0.05? And it's true, and I lost that 0.05 because of calculus 2, because my girlfriend was in period. I had to accompany her that day, so I was late for exam. So, so my Aaron asked me, so did you regret on that decision? I said, how to evaluate regretfulness? And he said, are you two still together? I said, no. It's a big mistake. Joking aside, I actually don't have any regrets in St. John's. I was going to transfer out. I got my, I was so sure that I was going to do a business school in my undergrad. So I got accepted by several places. And but I decided not to transfer. One is Terry gave me a raise on scholarship. Thank you, Terry. Second is I was with my roommate, Adam Cronin. He didn't know this, but today I'm gonna tell him. I was taking him in China, first time in his life in China. We were in Beijing, in the Ba District, with a couple other alums from St. John's. And And we were probably a little bit tipsy, and they asked me, why are you leaving? I was like, Adam, where I'm leaving? Adam said, I don't know. And then my answer became, I don't know, therefore I'm not going to leave. That simple. That thing, after looking back, it was a really good decision for me to stay, because it's too busy outside to look externally. I wouldn't have another 2 years to look internally. So it's the friendship I built here who hold me here, and it's the generous donation of the St. John's alumni who helped me here too. So thanks for that, money and the friendship. Last part is community and professional life, and how the sense of community impact my later decisions in career. So Chinese are like the only category of people in this country are very similar to Chinese are Jewish. You go to a Jewish community, they really have a very big emphasis on two things Chinese also value. One is education. Second thing is family. So every week Jewish family get together, and it used to be the case in China. But now it's still like this, but less so. But still, we place huge value on education and the family. I mentioned at the first point, looking for self part. I was confused on the idea of collectivism versus individualism. At one point that I thought, well, there's no sense of family here. Everybody was only thinking for themselves, right? So that's because this is the first thing you have to do when you were growing up, when you were trying to figure out what you want to do with your life. But I was wrong after 4 years here, and I still see monks here every time I come back, and I still see professors here, although I betrayed Matt Lindstrom by choosing to go to private sector, but Matt is still a good friend of mine, thankfully. So, professors like Matt, Paul from management department, we see each other very randomly around the world. 2015, who knows? I was going to a climate meeting at United Nations Climate Summit in Paris. I will run into Matt Lindstrom with a group of St. John's students and the mayor of St. Cloud or Twin Cities, somebody. I don't remember, less important than Matt. This past winter, I wasn't planning to go to China, but Paul was in China. And so we had dinner together, and he asked me where I was going to school, and what is Harvard, all that kind of question. Yeah, but very I think unplanned surprise and unplanned happy get together with a lot of you, and so I guess that for me, a part of it is by luck, by Chinese call it Ming, fate. Another part of it is I have become so St. John's, and so anytime I go anywhere, I always check on people. And for example, I said I run into Matt, but actually that was not the case. Before I went to Paris, I emailed Matt. I said, "Are you going?" He said, "Yes, I am going." I accidentally had dinner with Paul. Is that the case? No, it was not the case. Because when I was back in Shanghai, back China, I asked e-scholars, are e-scholars coming again this winter? And Paul said yes. So I schedule my time around. Again, because I value my experience here. How that impact my later decisions professionally, I have a professor called Larry Cope. He was the CEO of Danaher. Danaher was second best performing stock in New York Stock Exchange for a long time. He just recently nominated to be on the board of GE. Last year, I had a class from Larry, and Larry said, one thing stick to my mind is when yourself move forward and when yourself achieve so much, don't forget the people around me and don't forget the team who work together with you to make things happen. So I guess community means, to me, in professional sense, the team building, the management expertise, and whenever you make management decision, it's not only about Excel sheet, it's not only about how accurate the financial model and financial forecasting result you can build around these sophisticated models and SWOT analysis. It's really about the people around you. So for me, I benefited hugely from my education and my time here and my time later beyond after I graduated from St. John's. So that's why, again, I skipped my last day class at Harvard to come here. Thank you. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
So I'll lead off with a question of leadership scholar Warner Bennis wrote in his best-selling book on becoming a leader. Bennis also talked about the importance of knowing the world or the general pursuit of knowledge. How has the importance of lifelong learning been a part of your journey in engaging in global life?
I have to admit, I was not a good student in terms of the amount of reading I should have done before sophomore year. My first complete book I finished was for my first year seminar. Did that class still exist? Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's the book called On the Road, the Beat Generation, all that. And yes. Ironically, being a Chinese, you finish your first book in life completely is an English book. Quite sad on my side, on my culture. That was the first book, but the first book actually cautioned me, or maybe not cautioned, that's not the right word, drew me into thinking there's so much meat in reading is my philosophy class. A book called People and Men by Spanish philosopher Jose Ortega. And I remember I was reading this book for my assignment to write a paper. I was sitting nearby the lake, across the street from theology school, on the bench. And in a sudden, I felt like I was speaking to one person. That never happened to me before. And I think after that, I became very tentative to allocate some time, no matter how busy I am in work or in other things, to do some reading. And after I graduated from here, I had the fortune to come across some other professionals, well-established business people and scholars on East Coast. And one thing consistently I see is no matter how old they are, they keep the habit of reading. They carve out half an hour, 1 hour time for themselves every day to read. And I'm doing this now too. But the kind of books I read is, actually I got this question before this session too at one of the capstone class. The kind of books I read are kind of useless book. I don't read the leadership. I don't read too much management book. But I do read a lot of autobiography. I do read history. Sometimes if my mind is clear enough, I read philosophy, but it's kind of difficult sometimes. So yeah, reading is very, very important for me. For me, reading is one essential part. The other part is to really hear stories from different people and to meet people with very great stories. Not only the success story, but also the failure story. Sometimes it's a lot difficult to digest the failure than success. So, yeah.
Would you like to take the next question?
Sure. I'll take one question, and then I think we should open up for questions for other people. Yeah, it's wonderful to have you back on campus, Clement. It's wonderful to have inspired alums back. But when you say you were here between 6 and 10 years ago, it also reminds me how long I've been here. Can't be 6 years ago since you left. One of the things that I'm interested in you talking about, and as to how that prepared you maybe for other project work, is not necessarily exactly in your courses or your major, but I'm recalling, and I apologize, I can't remember the exact title, but you put together a couple of extraordinary conferences regarding China when you were here. And you really did an extraordinary job of bringing people in from the broader society and community and so on with regard to these conferences. And I just would like to hear your reflections on what you learned from that and are able to apply.
Sure, no problem. Thanks, John, for bringing up that project. It was a Minnesota-China Business Opportunity Conference. You call it a MacBook, so Mac actually adopted our name. But that project was basically, it's some little bit context why I started doing that. So my family, both of my parents are entrepreneurs back in China. Before my sophomore year, before I started doing this project, my only view about the possibility of the possible type of professional life is the private sector. And being a businessman, since I was 5, my dad said, become an entrepreneur and make money. But I came across, I think, my freshman year, I went to CSBS on a panel, and Professor Richard Bohr, who was retired, he and I, that was the first encounter, and he later on, I got to know him well enough. He told me what's his motivation doing U.S.-China project and set up he's the founding director of Asian Studies here, all that. And I was really, really inspired by his story. Basically, his pitch was, while he was a student at Harvard in the 1970s, this country has already had wars with 3 out of 4 countries in Eastern Asia, Vietnam, Korea, and Japan. So he didn't want to see another war with China, the last country in Eastern Asian bloc. So at that moment, I was like, wow, how narrow my thinking, my view about this world, my view about my professional life was. And only thinking about building a business myself, only thinking about myself in a sense. And that opened my mind. And later on, I started to think, what's the best way to engage, to give more information and education, to let people know more about my country, to know more about, actually, Minnesota was one of the first states in the US started a trade with China, with 3M, General Mills, Medtronic, all that. And So from the private sector angle, with the help of a lot of professors, and I studied this with a team of e-scholars and Chinese students. So I started planning that in 2009, and the first one was 2010. The second one was 2011, right before I graduated, and then it went on for another 2 or 3 years. Sadly, it was not here anymore. But what I learned from that was one is there's a need to bridge the private sector and public sector, and second is particularly in Midwest, the percentage of people who actually hold your U.S. passport, and the percentage of people in our age, probably your age, not my age anymore, who have traveled to China, who actually understand China, is limited. So in a higher education, there's a necessity to tell your peers, take them to China to understand what kind of person you are, to understand what you as a Chinese student or Chinese value, and so that they can understand where you're coming from. So down in the road, in 20 years, in 30 years, whether you are in a role of government or you are in a management executive role in company, whenever you encounter cross-culture issues, you two have the personal connection there. You two have the personal understanding outside of the professional world. So that's basically the takeaway from that. That also later on was the first trial of my trying public policy, and because of that project, I got very close to Matt and the McCarthy Center, and I won the Brendel Scholarship, and which helped me to afford a summer in Washington D.C. doing internship. And later, if it was not because of that internship in D.C. in the summer of 2011, I wouldn't be able to have a chance to work in a think tank after I graduated. So everything, like at that moment, I didn't think that much at all. I did that because I met inspiring people, and I thought that was for a very good cause, and I want to carve out something interesting myself on this in the middle of nowhere campus, right? So, but looking backwards, everything was pretty much linked together. Everyone and everything I did on this campus, yeah.
Yeah, if you guys want to approach the mics that are positioned on either end, if you have any questions, just raise your hand and we'll pass one on.
First thing I know is don't be shy. So if you have questions, feel free to ask. Yeah.
Can I ask? Clement? I'll just talk loudly. I just want to know a little bit about what's on your horizon. Your last day of classes at Harvard today. Thank you for being with us. Tell us a little bit about what's on your mind for the horizon.
I see. In the short term, my roommates and I are talking about going to South tonight. That's on the horizon. In terms of plans after graduation, I haven't finalized my plan yet. Couple options. One on the private sector side was I got some invitation to join infrastructure and a real estate company to do investment and development work back in China, and but I haven't sold myself yet on that fully. And on the public sector, Matt will be happy to hear this. I just got invitation about 2 weeks ago to be engaged in a U.S.-China project, and it's likely I'm gonna be pulled again for a little bit, but most likely I will stay in U.S. for at least a month after I graduated to work on this public sector U.S.-China relations mattered project, and maybe after half a year or a year or so, then going into private sector. Yeah.
We had a question in the front here, yeah.
I just have a very simple question. So you talk about a lot of things about like Spanish philosophy or like some help you got from others, but you didn't really talk about like your majors in undergraduate school. So that's what I'm wondering.
Okay.
What was your major in undergraduate school?
Economics.
Economics?
Yeah, but
No math?
minor in math.
Minor in
No
math.
surprise for Chinese, right?
Yeah, the calculus too.
Yeah, so it's funny you asked about the major. I was certainly a person, a young kid with a wide range of curiosity in different fields. Therefore, I changed my major 5 times in college. I started off as English linguistic / literature / psychology major in Hong Kong. And when I came here, my first major I was double major in accounting and management. At one point, I didn't register, but I was thinking about shifting to philosophy, and but that didn't get materialized. But simultaneously I was taking Java programming, computer science, engineering classes, and I thought that I want to get a job which can grant me enough freedom geographically. So as a program, you can program anywhere, and you can get paid. How nice that it is. And but I just couldn't stand spending 20 hours in the computer lab. I wasn't smart enough, I guess. Yes. So after that, I changed to economics, and then thankfully I graduated within 4 years successfully. Yeah, but changed a lot. But consistently, I've never. Every semester, I always had math. I always have had economics because of personal interests. Yeah.
Thank you.
Want to see Paul's hand up there?
Anyway, we can talk about that. I'm intrigued about the philosophy part of the philosophy class, and I remember when I took a philosophy class here at St. John's when I was a freshman or sophomore, and I really liked it. And actually, I got an A in it, and it was one of very few A's that I got. My GPA was a lot lower than yours. But I'm just trying to imagine what it would have been like for me, even if I had been studying Chinese for years, to take a philosophy class in Chinese. And so, what I'm trying to figure out is like philosophy's hard enough just to understand it in your first language. What is it like, for a sophomore? Was your grasp of English unusually good at that point, or did you struggle with that too?
Struggle heavily on that. Sarah knows. I started learning English when I was 5. So when I came here, I had decent level of proficiency. But I think I aced the philosophy class was because it was difficult enough for everybody to struggle. So I was from that perspective, I was playing in a very fair game with everybody else, because the content itself was so difficult. Even though you understand the language itself, it doesn't matter. It almost like I don't know, Swahili, something like that. So yeah, so the language part, but truthfully, after that semester, after that class, my language improved dramatically. But still, the first time, so the first summer I was in DC, the second summer I was in DC, so right after I graduated. So I was surrounded by a lot of diplomats, US diplomats and Chinese diplomats. And the way they use the language was so sophisticated. And give you an example, like, "Hey, how are you?" I said, "Good." And they have to say, "Fabulous." And so that was the second time I realized, oh my God, my English was not very well at all. And it's kind of steps, and still you can tell the way I speak. I still don't use these words, very elaborative words, very frequently. But by reading, hopefully helps, and hopefully by the time I have my kids, they will be better than me in English. Thank you. Yeah.
Anybody else? You're reminding me of a story you'd probably appreciate about the philosophy student who ran into her professor, and professor is the hi, professor said, "How are you doing on the Hegel assignment?" And the student said, "Oh, it's just, I'm working on it. It's very difficult. I'm spending at least a half hour on each page to get through it." And the professor said, "Well, there's your problem. You're trying to read too fast." And a very specific kind of question here locally, which a number of us have talked about here, Paul and I very definitely have talked about, whether it's the current political climate or whatever it might be, we only have 7 students going on our semester abroad program to Southwest University next fall. And we've been running around 10, 12, 13, something like that for the last few years. And I'm wondering, this just came to mind, Clement, as somebody who both obviously is and intimately knows China and intimately knows St. Ben, St. John's, if you have any suggestions about how we would go about trying to more effectively engage students' passions for wanting to study in China for a semester.
Yeah, sure. Not expert on persuading students going to China to do study abroad. Joe Rogers probably is better suited to answer this question than me. But I guess 2 ways in my mind. One is informal, the other one is a more formal way. I'll speak about the formal way, what I have in my mind first. When students come to understand or have the connection with China, or even anyone, not only students. For example, Ibis, you started traveling to China since 1990s, early 1990s, not because you love China, I know you do, but back then, not necessary, I guess, but because they have this demand in music performance, they appreciate the type of art you gave to the Chinese people, and you appreciate the type of friendship you build with the students and professors back in China. Therefore, you keep going back. So it's not necessarily sitting in a classroom of China with a bunch of Asian studies major saying, you are interested, therefore, let me teach you what China is like, and let me tell you there's this study abroad program to learn more about China. I'll say academically, it's kind of a insert China elements into different academic fields. In politics, in McCarthy Center, in McNeely Center, like Paul, John, you two, and Terry before engaged in this excellent program bringing in scholars to China every year to understand the most capitalist society is not U.S. but China. And in classroom setting, in management, particularly now, I understand the management major now is called Global
Business leadership.
Yeah, global business leadership program. When we talk about global, how could you talk about global without letting students understanding what's going on on the trade front, what's going on the microeconomic front between the companies, among the companies? That's impossible. So students have to understand why, and I guess to give some context to the students, the type of companies, like in my current business school education, I remember the first time in our classroom, we had our first case on Chinese company Alibaba. And after case, a lot of my American friends were surprised. And after class, they asked me, wow, I didn't know how advanced the technology a Chinese company could build, and I didn't know how rich a Chinese company could be. So using these non-Asian study, Chinese focused academic discipline subjects to give students some opportunities to be immersed into China and US-China business relationship is crucial, I guess, and which you and Paul are already doing. But that's on the formal side. But on the informal side, you asked my roommate why he went to China with me when we were like sophomore year, and Adam would not answer. I guess Adam wouldn't go. Just.
Well, the thing I always said was it was never a place I thought about visiting. I mean, not that I was ever against going. It's just like, you know, so I think, but then when I was there and, you know, all the stuff that we did, realizing there's so many places to visit, it's such a big country and, you know, similar to ours, that every place has their own neat, cool thing to see. In my own.
Yes. So exactly on that point, the informal friendship part, non-academic part is also very crucial. I always sometimes position myself as an ambassador of my country in higher education, in whatever occasion I go to, particularly the kind of occasion, the kind of environment. I was the only Chinese face in that setting. And so in a sense, be friendly to the people around you. This is particularly talking to the Chinese students on this campus now. Don't spend time only with Chinese. And even when I was here, I clearly can see that there are two groups of Chinese students. One group, they only play mahjong and they drink together, and they don't mingle with the rest of the community. It's not helpful, because why not you just do that back in home? Why you do that here? If you are here, you better just go out and understand how people party, how people, why people laugh, why people cry. And you will realize, just like as Adam said, a lot of similarities. It's not so much about like people don't like that place. People have a negative view against China or Asia or the rest of the world. Honestly, it's more like people just never thought about that. And can you be the person from the friendship side to make your peers aware, oh, there's this new place, very interesting, the people there, just like you, academically very driven, non-academically, socially, they also value day-to-day friendship. And so.
So you've kind of talked a lot about the importance of building intercultural friendships and connections. And a lot of us young professionals are going to be entering into a global workplace. What do you think is the best advice for students who are looking to kind of expand their intercultural communication skills or just learn how to navigate a global work environment?
First of all, I don't think anyone can force you to be international or to be intercultural.
We tried.
Yeah. So, secondly, some professions do not require you to be intercultural or so international, and some professional place a heavy emphasis on dealing with this type of cross-cultural and international front. So your field will dictate a big part of that. And thirdly, I think somewhat similar to my previous answer, formally read to get this education, even if you graduate from here by reading books, by listening to people, stories from different backgrounds. Informally, I really have a very good peer group to be associated with who are open-minded to look at you, look into your eyes, and consider you as the same person as they are. And so over time, I believe these intercultural, you call it competency, will be built implicitly in your daily communication. There's no one can force you to, and but if you do not become intentional enough, and you cannot be that either.
Well stated. One of the things that I've learned about the Benedictine culture over the years is that historically speaking, it was the Benedictines who perfected the mechanical clock about 700-800 years ago. And that dimension of the Benedictine culture is still quite present. Going late on meetings is not something that faculty likes to see happen at faculty meetings, I know. So we did say 3 to 4 o'clock. So I'm sure that Clement would be happy to have personal conversations if somebody wants to have questions after it for a while, or a few minutes at least anyway. But on that note, I just open it to you to say just whatever you would like to say in closing, Clement. Okay. Thank you for also participating in this, Catherine. Thank you all for arranging this, the McCarthy Center. And I don't see. Yeah. He's not here. I know. I was looking for Margaret, but I didn't see her. So.
And thank you all the students for attending. I know Friday nights are always a hard sell, but we appreciate your attendance.
Yes, very much.
To close up, I guess, for sure, this is not going to be the last time I come back. Okay. And meanwhile, if I am fortunate enough to be qualified to sit on the board of director of Regents, I would be happy to, down in the road. Thirdly, really to the current students, immerse yourself to this environment. It's a very good, fabulous environment. We have a very nice lake, everything surrounded. So don't waste your time just by staying in your dorm room, and go out and speak to people and believe in yourself. And there's a way, and there's a path always for you. You may not already see. Thank you.